Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sharon Stevens. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Joining me in the studio are Anna Crosslin, President and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis, and Harold Law, who first came to the United States in 1956 as a Chinese refugee. He's since played quite an important civic role along with his wife, Helena, in the local community. And soon to join us will be Bret Narayan, a St. Louis alderman who was sworn in just last month. Anna and Harold, thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Let's talk first about Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. A lot of people may not have heard of that. Tell us what's the idea behind it.
Well, it's actually Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and it really is a product of several previous federal pieces of legislation. Here comes Bret, in fact. Welcome. So we're excited. We're excited about it. It started out originally as a day, a weekend, and it's now become a month of celebrations. It's about being able to recognize a population that has very deep roots in the United States, but about which a lot of people simply don't know. And here in St. Louis, it's in fact a similar situation where Asian Americans have for more than 100 years, in fact, been integral to the cultural fiber of St. Louis. And so we think this is a really wonderful way to be able to recognize those values.
Okay, thank you very much. And Bret Narayan, a St. Louis alderman, has joined us.
Thank you for having me.
Bret, you're partnering with the city's Recorder of Deeds, Michael Butler, I believe, to honor St. Louis Asian Pacific Americans in a special way next Monday at City Hall. Tell us about the event itself.
Sure. So it's going to be, Mr. Butler has decided to host the first ever celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month here in St. Louis at St. Louis City Hall. It's for a community that doesn't always see itself in the halls of government, but as the guest pointed out, has a deep and sustained history here in St. Louis. The first ever recorded Asian American here in St. Louis was Ala Lee back in 1857.
How do you know that?
I did a bunch of research before this show, actually, and one of the interesting things that I found is that Ala Lee kind of palled around with the Irish American community in St. Louis here, and I kind of thought it was interesting because part of the district that I represent, part of my ward, is the historically Irish-American neighborhood over in Dogtown. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see that come full circle.
Okay, and what ward is that? I'm sorry.
The 24th Ward.
24th Ward. Okay, very good. Anything else about the event that?
Michael Butler is putting it on. He wants to, kind of show that he cares about diversity here in the city. We have honorees including Anna Crosslin, Harold and Helena Law, Luna Lau from Lona's Little Eats, which is a fantastic place here in town, James Beard finalist, and Sushin Proprizel, who without his work, I think that, at least in my perspective, he's one of the foundations here in St. Louis for the Asian community. I know that when my dad came here in the 60s, it was impossible to find any of the food from where he was from in India. So the Proprizel family and J International, they made it possible to have a little bit of home here in St. Louis, which I know has gone a long way for a lot of folks in the Asian American community.
Okay, I'm interested in hearing all of your personal stories. I want to start with Harold. What's your personal story?
Well, I came to the United States in 1956 under the Refugee Relief Act. And my wife also a refugee, and she came in 1955. And because we were considered as refugees because we came out from China in 1948. So because of that, we couldn't go back, and then we were given this refugee status. So both my wife and I were married. We met in University of Michigan, where I went to school, and then my wife went to Michigan State, We got
Those
married.
are rivals.
Hey, we were rivals, that's right. I always call her, she went to a Moo school. And so we married, we came to St. Louis in 1963. So we stay here ever since.
Okay, Anna, how about you?
Well, I'm a Japanese American. While people know me as the director of the International Institute, my heritage is actually from Japan. My mother is a Japanese immigrant, and my father was a serviceman in the U.S. Air Force, a language specialist. And so they met in Japan during the Korean War, and I was born in Tokyo. And when the war was over, and my father then was reassigned to the United States, we came over here, and I was about 2.5 at the time. So, my roots are deep in terms of Japan. Lots of relatives over there, and I'm involved in the community here in St. Louis. And it has helped me, in fact, in my professional life, because I understand what it's like to grow up with a foot in two cultural worlds.
Do you feel kind of destined to be doing what you're doing?
Yeah, there was a bit of destiny to it. Absolutely.
Okay. Let me get back to you, Alderman.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give me an idea of how you think St. Louis has changed in terms of the communities that we're talking about?
Well, I was born in 1984, and when I kind of started looking around and taking notice of the world around me, in St. Louis, there wasn't a lot for the Asian American community in terms of restaurants, grocery stores, religious houses. And over the last 25 years, we've seen just a huge change that's allowed for a whole lot more inclusivity. And I think it's done great to bring bigger companies to the St. Louis region. People are interested in moving here. Now we have, a vibrant culinary scene, and I struggle to think of a region whose food is not represented now, and that's been an amazing thing, an amazing transformation in the region to go from, it's hard to find, some of the basic spices for cooking to, what part of Asia would we like to go to a restaurant and pick up food from tonight? It's been a really neat transformational change.
Do you think that you could have been elected 20 years ago?
That's one of the conversations that we had inside the campaign, even this current run. Having never had an Asian American elected official in the St. Louis area, we weren't sure, and we decided to roll the dice and go with it. And I think the numbers spoke for themselves. And the voters didn't see it as a major issue or embraced it. And I'm not sure which, but they certainly didn't seem to see it as an impediment.
Yeah, sure. I think what's happened on the South Side, just my observation is that, we started resettling refugees here in St. Louis in about 1975 with the fall of Saigon. And over that period of time, the last 45 years, the South Side has really begun to change, and there's been a flavor of immigrants, ethnicity that's been added to many of the neighborhoods down there that indeed, as Brett is saying, has attracted business people, young people, particularly people who live on the coasts, who move to St. Louis for business purposes. And so they've really looked for certain kinds of things in terms of culture and opportunity. They have a much more global view in some ways than their parents or grandparents might have, even the people who have been born and bred here in St. Louis, because of that diversity that's occurred. One of the biggest groups down on the South Side, not related to Asians, but of course was the Bosnian resettlement in the 90s. We actually wondered whether at that time we might see an alderman come out of some of the South districts because the number of Bosnians were so heavy, but it didn't happen. And, so we're really excited about the idea that somebody, with an ethnic heritage now is really on the board of aldermen, because that is a remarkable difference over where it's been for a long, long period of time. An Asian heritage, it's wonderful. But really, the progressives that live down on the South Side now, the fact that the South Grand International District is there, et cetera, which started out because of Asian business people who actually started to redevelop it, that all of this has created an environment in which this diversity is an opportunity now that you didn't see before.
Do you see that there are any lingering frustrations, stereotypes?
Oh, there's absolutely stereotypes. The world is built on stereotypes. Regrettably, at this point, everybody has preconceptions, and the way that you begin to really defeat those preconceptions is because you introduce people to people who are not like them, and through those friendships and collaborations, then you begin to break down the stereotypes because they say, "Gee, he's not like him. Gee, she's not like him," etc. And that's what begins to develop the relationships.
Mm-hmm. How about you, gentlemen, Alderman Harold Law? Do you see those kinds of things still?
Yes, in the beginning, they was very obvious, and in my experience, I find that as we get along, as we know each other, that becomes a little bit much better. Let me tell you a story. My wife was perhaps the first Asian or Chinese American who taught at Sumner High School in 1963, and she taught French. And she told me that when a student came to the classroom, they thought they went to the wrong classroom. They never would expect that a Chinese lady could teach French. So that was very interesting. But then, because of that, we got to know a lot of the local families and their parents. So that was a good measure of our integration.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have to take a break right now, and we'll be back in just a moment to talk about the contributions and growing influence of people here with Pacific Island and Asian heritage. May is a month that recognizes them. And I'm talking again with Anna Crosslin, President and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis, Bret Narayan, a St. Louis alderman who was sworn in last month, and Harold Law, who first came to the United States in 1956 as a Chinese refugee. This is St. Louis on the Air, St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Now back to Anna Crosslin, Harold Lynn, and Bret Narayan. Now we're talking about, including Anna and Harold, there are 6 Asian Pacific Americans being honored at next Monday's event. Let's talk a little bit more about who they are. You mentioned it, Alderman, a little while ago, but let's talk about them in terms of changes that they've helped to make in this area.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe Miss Crosslin would be a better.
Well, I know many of the recipients, and so I just wanted to say something, in fact, about how pleased I am to be honored with them. In addition to Harold and Helen, we have some really superior entrepreneurs that are part of the group that's being recognized today. Suchin Prapaisilp, in fact, is part of a family, a Thai family here in St. Louis. He and his brother Jay originally arrived here, but there are many other family members, a sister, some others, and they are literally the link to a network of Thai businesses here in St. Louis. Jay International Business on South Grand, but the King and I Restaurant, the United Provisions in University City, Global Markets in Kirkwood, plus many of the Thai restaurants in University City are all part of that family's empire, if we want to call it. Kiku Obata, then, who is also being recognized as a third-generation Japanese American whose father, Gyo Obata, from HOK has really been a stalwart visionary architect here in St. Louis and around the world. But she runs a very successful graphics firm that's located on the second floor up above the pageant and does the design work for signage, etc., for a lot of different international and national projects, including, for instance, Mall of America in Minneapolis. Lona Luo is actually a Chinese immigrant. Her husband is is a St. Louisan, a native St. Louisan, who met her in China when he was over there teaching English. In fact, in her home province, which I believe was Yunnan, which is very close to the Myanmar and Laotian border. And so the food that she offers really has spices that are very familiar to people from that neck of the wood, from South Asia, and it's a delight because it has a slightly different twist than to what other Chinese influences are within her food as well, and it's made it really she shows up on all kinds of best lists, as Bret said. It's about James Beard, but it's also very much about a taste that here in St. Louis is really unique.
Absolutely.
Quite a diversity of professions and that sort of thing, and areas of influence. I mean, you're going to forever be known as a trailblazer because you are a first. Am I correct?
That's my understanding. When we filed the paperwork to run, we hadn't actually thought about it too much. But then actually Jason Rosenbaum here from St. Louis Public Radio got in touch with me and said, hey, I think you might be the first Asian American if you're elected. And we went back and looked, and it kind of surprised me just given the history of Asian Americans in the United States. But then when we started looking back and seeing some of the bars to immigration and ultimately to running for office that the Asian American community faced, it started to make a little bit more sense why 2019 we're having the first Asian American elected rather than 40 years ago.
Yeah, the 25th or the 26th one. Who can tell me about Hop Alley? What is Hop Alley?
Well, we don't know exactly where they got the name Hop Alley, but that's an area that way back about 100 years ago, the Chinese immigrants concentrated in that maybe 2 or 3 city blocks. But ever since the stadium was built and that area was designated as a parking lot, so they were dispersed. So we still don't know, or I still don't know why it is called Hop Alley.
But is there something about it that people revere or talk about in such a way that it should be remembered?
Back in those days, there was maybe 1 or 2 restaurants, and most of them spread out hand laundry. And I have known people who lived in a Hop Alley in the 1920s and 30s, but they were not able to tell me why it was called Hop Alley. Yeah. But it was concentrated all the Chinese American. When we first came in 1963, there were only about 600 Chinese Americans in St. Louis, and now the estimation is about over 50,000 Chinese American. Of course, Asian American probably over 70 or 80,000 now.
Okay, so it's not an offensive term or description.
No, it's
well,
not.
it was actually a segregated area of the community where Asians lived because they like many other minority populations, really weren't able to live as freely around the community. And so they found that there was language support there, and they basically operated businesses where they either sold to other Asians or where people came in then to purchase goods from them, including, as Harold just said, the laundries, etc. But in the 1920s and 30s, there was a lot of segregation and discrimination toward Asian Americans here in St. Louis, and so that really was the nexus, if we want to call it that, of this area that became known as Hop Alley. And as Harold said, when Busch Stadium was built, then Hop Alley was demolished in order to build one of the parking lots that were there, and then people were distributed all over the area because they could move more in the 60s, and that then became the beginning of certain neighborhoods like Olive Street Road, where many of the Asian restaurants are located today. Annie Leung, who had a store and a restaurant down in Hop Alley, actually moved to South Grand at the time, down by Gravois, and so they didn't all go to University City, but they kind of dispersed at that point.
Okay. We have a phone call right now This is Tom from Afton. Hello, Tom.
Hello. I'd like to ask Anna and Brett if you can tell me about St. Louisan, who probably deserves more attention. If you go to the Dogtown Veterans Memorial, you'll see a brick with the name Mitsuo Saito, a Japanese American who fought in World War II on our side. He was in the 442nd Regiment, which history buffs will know was an all Japanese American regiment. Many of the people came out of the internment camps, many of the young men. And Dogtown veterans have told me that after the war, Mr. Saito also trained St. Louis police officers in judo.
Oh.
And I know only that, and I wonder if Brett or Anna knows anything more about him.
Well, I don't know him individually, but I'm involved with the Japanese American Citizens League, and which are comprised of many people who actually their parents and grandparents arrived here in St. Louis from internment camps at the end of World War II. There were two internment camps in Arkansas, Jerome and Rower, which were located relatively close to St. Louis, and so it became a destination for some of those individuals who, after the war, were quite frankly encouraged not to return to the West Coast. And St. Louis had offered opportunity at that point for these people to be resettled. And in fact, Kiku Obata, who's being recognized on Monday night, her grandfather, Chiura, and father, Gyo, came to St. Louis initially because of the relocation from the camps, and Gyo was one of the first Japanese Americans who was offered resettlement and attended the School of Architecture at Washington University. So there is a tie in there, but that individual in particular I don't know, but I'm sure that he was involved with that community.
Okay.
One of the things that I love about Dogtown is that it has a historical society and a historian, and I've taken down Mr. Sieto's name, and you've given the Dogtown historian a new homework project, because I definitely want to know more about his contributions to the area.
Well, I'll tell you, our time's about to wind down here, but before we go, Brett, I'd like you to just reiterate what's going on next Monday and give us the details.
So from 6 to 8, Michael Butler is hosting the first ever celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month here at St. Louis City Hall. It's sponsored by the Recorder of Deeds. There's going to be food there from Lona's Little Eats, music by DJ Agile 1. The event is free, but it's ticketed, so make sure that you get tickets to it, but it should be a great time. I know that there's a lot of folks looking forward to it, and I certainly am.
And it's in the Rotunda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I want to thank Anna Crosslin, Harold Law, and Bret Narayan for joining me today. Thank you all for being here. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.